"Sir, you need a membership card to enter." The voice belonged to Tyler Jenkins, 24 years old, a former college athlete who now worked the front desk at the Naval Special Warfare Center fitness facility in Coronado, California. He stood behind the sleek checking counter, tablet in hand, blocking the turnstile with his body as he addressed the elderly man standing before him. The old man, his name was Frank Cordell, though the name on his faded gym bag simply read Cord, looked to be in his mid-70s. He was lean, almost gaunt, with white hair cropped military short and a face deeply lined by sun and age. He wore simple gray sweatpants and a worn navy t-shirt that had seen better days, the logo so faded it was barely readable. His hands, resting on the strap of his gym bag, were gnarled and scarred, the knuckles swollen with arthritis. "I was told I could use the facility," Frank said quietly. His voice was gravelly, roughened by decades of something. "Cigarettes maybe, or salt water. I have authorization." Tyler sighed, the kind of exaggerated sigh that said he'd heard every excuse in the book. "Sir, this isn't a public gym. This is a restricted facility for active duty personnel assigned to Naval Special Warfare SEALs, SWCC, support staff with proper credentials. If you're retired military, there's a veterans gym about 3 miles down the road. They'd be happy to have you there." Frank didn't move. He just stood there, patient and still, his pale blue eyes steady on the young man's face. "I was told I could train here, by someone with authority." "Who told you that?" Tyler asked, his tone dripping with skepticism. He glanced at the 2 other gym staff members standing nearby, both young men in their 20s, wearing staff polo shirts with the facility logo. One of them, Marcus, snickered quietly. "Probably got confused," Marcus muttered, not quite under his breath. "Happens with old folks. Someone tells them something, they misremember where they're supposed to be." Frank turned his gaze to Marcus. There was no anger in his eyes, no wounded pride, just that same steady, unblinking calm. It was unsettling in a way Tyler couldn't quite articulate, like looking into the eyes of someone who had seen things that would break most people, and had simply chosen to keep standing. "Look," Tyler said, trying to inject some sympathy into his voice while maintaining his authority. "I'm sure whoever you spoke to meant well, but there's been a misunderstanding. This facility is for operators and active support staff. We can't just let anyone walk in off the street, even if they're veterans. Security protocols, liability insurance, you understand." "I understand," Frank said quietly. He made no move to leave, but he also didn't argue. He just waited. This patience was somehow more frustrating to Tyler than if the old man had yelled or demanded to speak to a manager. It made Tyler feel like he was the one being unreasonable, even though he was clearly just doing his job. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave," Tyler said, his voice firming up. "If you don't, I'll have to call base security." Behind Frank, the main door opened. A group of Navy SEALs walked in, young, fit, radiating that particular brand of quiet confidence that comes from being part of an elite brotherhood. They were fresh from a training evolution, their faces still flushed with exertion, talking and laughing among themselves. One of them, a junior officer named Lieutenant Briggs, noticed the standoff at the desk and paused. "Everything okay here?" "Just a misunderstanding," Tyler said. "This gentleman was just leaving." Briggs glanced at Frank, did a quick assessment, told, "Civilian clothes, no credentials," visible, and nodded. "Sir, if you need directions to the Veterans Center, I can help with that. But this facility really is restricted." Frank turned to look at the young SEAL. "I was at Tarawa," he said simply. There was a beat of silence. Briggs frowned. "Tarawa, that's World War II, sir." "Korean War," Frank corrected gently. "But yes, a long time ago, sir, with all due respect. That's incredible service. But this gym is specifically for—" "I know what it's for," Frank interrupted, his voice still quiet but carrying a note of something deeper. "I helped design the training protocols you use here, back when this facility was just a blueprint." Marcus laughed outright at that. "Dude, seriously, you helped design SEAL training? That's a good one." Tyler held up a hand. "Sir, I don't know who you are or what you think you did, but making false claims about military service is actually a crime. I really don't want to have to call the MPs, but you're leaving me no choice." Frank sighed, not with frustration, but with a weariness that seemed to come from somewhere deep and ancient. He reached into his gym bag and pulled out a worn leather wallet. From it, he extracted a plastic card and placed it on the counter. Tyler picked it up. It was a military ID retired, expired years ago. The photo showed a much younger version of the man standing before him, but the name matched. Frank Cordell, USN Ret. "This doesn't authorize you to," Tyler began, but Frank was already reaching back into his wallet. He pulled out another card, this one laminated and clearly official despite its age. Tyler's eyes widened as he read it. "That's a NATO observer credential," Frank said quietly, "signed by 3 different SEAL team commanders. It's lifetime access to any NSW facility for training consultation purposes. Check the database if you don't believe me." Tyler looked at the card, then at Frank, then at the card again. His confidence wavered. This is from 1985. It's got to be expired by now. Lifetime means lifetime, Frank said. But if you need to verify it, I can wait. The atmosphere had shifted. The SEALs who had been about to head into the gym had paused, now paying attention to the unfolding situation. Lieutenant Briggs stepped closer, holding out his hand. May I see that, sir? Tyler handed over the card. Briggs studied it carefully, his expression shifting from skepticism to confusion to something approaching concern. He pulled out his phone and stepped away, making a quiet call. Marcus leaned over to Tyler and whispered, "Dude, just let him use the damn gym. What's the worst that happens? Old guy gets tired after 5 minutes and leaves. Not worth the hassle." But Tyler had his pride now. He'd drawn a line in the sand, and backing down felt like admitting defeat. "No, we have rules for a reason. If we let one person bend them, where does it stop?" Frank stood quietly, his gym bag still over his shoulder, as Briggs talked on the phone. The young lieutenant's face was growing increasingly pale. After a minute he ended the call and walked back over. "Sir," Briggs said to Tyler, his voice tight. "I just spoke with the command master chief. He said he'd..." Paused, looking at Frank with new eyes. "He said that Mr. Cordell has unrestricted access to this facility. Always has, always will." Tyler blinked. "What? Why?" "He didn't say. He just said to let him through immediately and to extend every courtesy. But now, Jenkins, that's an order." Tyler stepped aside, flustered and confused. Frank nodded his thanks and walked through the turnstile, his movements slow but steady. As he passed the group of young SEALs, one of them a young petty officer, with a cocky grin, muttered just loud enough to be heard, probably friends with someone important from back in the day. "Old Boys Club." Frank heard it. He always heard it. He didn't respond. He just kept walking toward the locker room, his worn gym bag swinging gently at his side. But behind him, Lieutenant Briggs was on his phone again, this time to the team commander. And within 15 minutes, word would spread through the facility like wildfire. By the time Frank finished changing into his workout clothes, everyone would know that something significant had just happened. They just didn't understand what yet. What none of them knew, what they couldn't possibly know, was that the faded tattoo hidden beneath Frank Cordell's shirt was about to change everything, and the man who would see it was currently finishing a classified briefing 3 buildings away, completely unaware that he was about to come face to face with a ghost from the very beginning of everything he held sacred. Frank Cordell stood at the pull-up bar, his weathered hands gripping the cold metal. The arthritis made it hurt. Everything hurt these days, but he'd learned long ago that pain was just information. It told you where your limits were. It didn't tell you to stop. He pulled himself up slowly. His form was textbook perfect, elbows in chest to bar-controlled descent. It took him twice as long as it would have taken any of the young SEALs training around him, but he made it. 1 rep, then another, then a third. At the bench press station nearby, 3 young sailors were taking turns lifting, their voices carrying across the gym floor. "Did you see that old guy they let in?" one of them said, loud enough for Frank to hear. "Dude looks like he's about to break a hip. I heard he's got some kind of special pass." Another replied, "Probably donated money or something. Rich old guy wanting to feel tough." The third one laughed. "Yeah, nothing says tough like doing pull-ups at the speed of molasses." Frank completed his 5th pull-up and dropped down, his shoulders burning. He didn't acknowledge the comments. He'd learned decades ago that some people needed to feel superior by making others feel small. It said more about them than it did about him. He moved to the rowing machine next, settling onto the seat with careful precision. As he began to row, maintaining perfect form despite the protest of his aging joints, more whispers followed him. Someone said, "He claims he helped design our training protocols." Bullshit. Probably just tells stories at the VFW. "I don't know, man. Did you see Briggs's face? He looked like he'd seen a ghost." The rowing machine's digital display showed distance, stroke rate, and time. Frank kept his pace steady, not fast, but rhythmic and sustainable. 20 strokes per minute. A pace he'd maintained for over 50 years. A pace that had once carried him through waters that would have killed most men. His mind drifted, as he rowed, it always did. Back to colder waters, darker nights, to a time when there were no fancy gyms or rowing machines, just the ocean and the mission and the men beside you. He remembered the weight of the rebreather on his chest, the absolute darkness of a moonless night 2 miles off a hostile shore, the sound of his own breathing steady, controlled, even as his heart hammered with adrenaline, the cold that went beyond cold, that became a living thing trying to kill you from the inside. Out he remembered Hans' young, strong hands, not yet gnarled by time securing demolition charges to underwater obstacles. Fingers working by touch alone, because you couldn't risk even the faintest light. Every movement deliberate. Every second counted. A sharp laugh from across the gym pulled him back to the present. He was an old man on a rowing machine, surrounded by warriors who had no idea that the foundation they stood on had been built by men like him, men who had done the impossible, because there was no other choice. He finished his rowing session 2,000 meters. Split time steady throughout and stood up slowly. His lower back ached, his shoulders burned, but he was still standing, still moving. That was something. He made his way to the floor mat area, intending to do some stretching. That's where it happened. As he bent down to remove his shoes, better grip for stretching exercises, his worn Navy t-shirt rode up slightly, just a few inches. Just enough. Across the gym, Command Master Chief Derek Mason had just entered for his own workout. Mason was a legend in his own right, 30 years in the teams, multiple combat deployments, a chest full of medals he never talked about. He was the senior enlisted advisor for the entire Naval Special Warfare Center, and when he spoke, people listened. He'd been heading for the weight rack when something caught his eye, a flash of ink on pale skin, a tattoo on the lower back of the old man everyone had been whispering about. Mason stopped walking, stopped breathing. His gym bag slipped from his shoulder and hit the floor with a thud that echoed across the gym. The tattoo was faded, so faded that from any real distance it would be invisible, but Mason was close enough. And he knew exactly what he was looking at. It wasn't elaborate. No skulls, no flags, no motivational text, just a simple design, a sea turtle rendered in black ink, with a combat knife crossed beneath it. Above the turtle were numbers, 1943. Mason's face went white. He stood frozen, staring, as everything he thought he knew about military history suddenly became real. The tattoo was impossible. It was a myth. It was holy shit, he whispered then, louder, his voice cracking. Attention on deck. Every person in the gym froze. In Naval Special Warfare facilities, those words meant one thing: a senior officer had entered. Everyone immediately stopped what they were doing and came to attention, but there was no officer. Just Mason, standing in the middle of the gym floor, staring at Frank Cordell like he was seeing a ghost. Master Chief, Lieutenant Briggs said uncertainly. Sir, what's everyone out? Mason said, his voice tight. Clear the gym now, Master Chief. We're in the middle of now. The authority in his voice was absolute. Within 60 seconds, the gym had emptied. Confused sailors and SEALs filed out, whispering among themselves, leaving only Mason and Frank. Frank had straightened up during the commotion, his shirt falling back into place, covering the tattoo. He looked at Mason with those calm, steady eyes. You saw it, Frank said. It wasn't a question. Mason took 3 steps forward, then dropped to one knee. A Command Master Chief, one of the most respected men in Naval Special Warfare, kneeling before an old man in sweatpants. Sir, Mason said, his voice thick with emotion. I never thought I'd meet one of you. I didn't think any of you were still alive. Frank's expression didn't change. Most aren't, but I'm stubborn. Sir, your Mason couldn't seem to find the words. Your UDT, original UDT, not just UDT. One of the first. You were at Tiroir, you were at Normandy. You were my god, sir. You're the reason I exist. Frank shook his head slightly. I'm just an old frogman who didn't have the good sense to quit. No, sir, Mason said, his voice firm now. You're more than that. You're one of the men who crawled onto beaches while the world burned. You're one of the men who swam through darkness so the Marines could live. You're one of the original Naked Warriors. The title hung in the air between them. The Naked Warriors. That's what they'd called the first Underwater Demolition Team's men who swam into enemy harbors wearing nothing but swim trunks, a knife, and enough explosives to level a city block. No wetsuits, no rebreathers, no backup, just the mission and the certainty that most of them wouldn't make it back. Frank was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, that turtle on my back, got it in 43. All of us did. The ones who made it through Hell Week at Fort Pierce. It wasn't official, just something we did so we'd remember. So we'd know who we were. Mason stood up slowly. Sir, I need to make a call. There's someone who needs to meet you. Several someones. They need to know you're here. I just wanted to get a workout in. Frank said simply. I understand, sir. But this is bigger than that. You understand that, right? You're not just a veteran. You're not just UDT, you single quotes double quotes. Mason struggled for the right word. You're the foundation. Everything we do, everything we are as SEALs, it started with men like you. Frank shrugged slightly, a gesture that somehow conveyed both humility and acceptance. I did my part. That was a long time ago. Sir, permission to speak freely. You don't need my permission, Master Chief, I'm retired. Mason shook his head. No, sir, a man like you never retires. You're part of the Brotherhood forever. Paused, gathering his thoughts. Those kids out there, the ones who are making jokes, they have no idea. They think SEAL history starts in 1962. They don't know about you, about what you did. And that's my failure. Sir, that's on me and every other instructor who didn't make sure they understood where they came from. Can't blame them, Frank said. It was classified for decades. Most of the records were destroyed. The men I served with, most of them are gone now. We were never supposed to be heroes. We were just supposed to do the job, but you did more than the job, didn't you, sir? Frank was quiet. Mason pulled out his phone. Sir, I'm going to call the commander of SEAL Team 5. He's going to want to meet you. And then I'm going to call the Naval Special Warfare Command historian. And then Master Chief, Frank interrupted gently. I appreciate it really, but I didn't come here for recognition. I came here because someone at the VA told me this gym had good equipment and I'd be welcome. That's all. Mason looked at him for a long moment. Then he nodded. Understood. sir. But will you at least allow me to invite some of the senior leadership to meet you? Not for a ceremony, not for publicity. Just ... to shake your hand, to say thank you. Frank considered this. Will they make a fuss? Probably. Will there be speeches? Most likely, Frank sighed. All right, but after my workout, I came here to train, and that's what I'm going to do. A smile tugged at Mason's face. Of course, sir. Would you like me to clear the gym for you? No, let them back in. I'm not special. I'm just old. Sir, with respect, you're the most special person who's ever walked through those doors. But I'll honor your wishes. Mason walked to the door and opened it. The hallway was packed with confused sailors and SEALs, all waiting to find out what had just happened. False alarm, Mason announced. Resume normal operations. As they filed back in, talking among themselves, Mason walked back to Frank. Sir, I'll leave you to your workouts, but I'll be making some calls. Expect visitors within the hour. Frank nodded. Fair enough. As Mason walked away, Frank returned to his stretching. Around him, the gym slowly returned to normal, weights clanking, equipment humming, voices rising and falling in conversation. But now, the whispers had changed. Did you see the Master Chief's face? He kneeled. I've never seen him kneel to anyone. Who the hell is that old guy? Frank ignored them all. He bent into a hamstring stretch, his aged muscles protesting, and began counting silently. The same count he'd used in 1943. The same count he'd used when he was 22 years old and the ocean was trying to kill him. 1, 2, 3, 4. Some things never changed. The gym had filled up again, but there was a strange energy now. Word had spread that something significant was happening, though no one quite knew what. The usual banter and casual atmosphere had been replaced by hushed conversations and sidelong glances at the old man who was methodically working his way through an exercise routine that was, frankly, putting some of the younger sailors to shame. Frank was on his 10th set of dumbbell curls, lightweight but perfect form, when the door opened and a group of officers walked in. Not just any officers. These were the men who ran naval special warfare on the West Coast. Leading them was Captain James Reardon, commander of Naval Special Warfare Group 1. Behind him came 3 SEAL Team commanders, 2 Master Chiefs, and trailing at the back, looking distinctly uncomfortable, was Tyler Jenkins from the front desk. The gym went silent. This was unprecedented. Commanders didn't just show up at the gym en masse, not for any normal reason. Frank set down his dumbbells carefully and stood up, his t-shirt damp with sweat. He looked at the approaching group with that same calm expression he'd worn since arriving. Captain Reardon stopped 3 paces away. He was in his 50s, a career SEAL with countless deployments under his belt. He commanded thousands of men and had medals for valor that most people would never know about. He was, by any measure, one of the most powerful men in naval special warfare. And he was looking at Frank Cordell like he was seeing a legend made flesh. Mr. Cordell, Reardon said, his voice carrying across the silent gym, I owe you an apology. Several of us do. Frank tilted his head slightly. I don't believe we've met, Captain. We haven't, sir, but we should have. A long time ago. Reardon gestured to the others. These are my fellow commanders. We'd like to request a moment of your time. I'm in the middle of my workout, Frank said mildly. I understand, sir. This won't take long. But first, Reardon turned to Tyler, who looked like he wanted to sink through the floor. Mr. Jenkins, do you have something to say? Tyler stepped forward, his face red. Sir, I'm sorry. I didn't know who you were. I was just trying to follow protocol. But I should have been more respectful. I apologize. Frank nodded. Apology accepted. You were doing your job. Can't fault a man for that. Thank you, sir, Tyler whispered. Reardon turned back to Frank. Mr. Cordell, I've been a SEAL for 30 years. I've studied the history of this command extensively. I know about the underwater demolition teams. I know about Fort Pierce, about the Hell Weeks, about the missions that were never officially recorded. But I'll admit something to why I thought I was studying history. I didn't think I'd ever actually meet someone who lived it. Most of us are gone, Frank said quietly. I know, sir. That's what makes this moment so important. Reardon took a breath. Master Chief Mason showed me your tattoo, the sea turtle, the knife, the year. I've seen that design exactly once before, in a photograph at the UDT SEAL Museum. It was on the back of a man named Chief Warrant Officer Samuel Rhodes. Frank's expression flickered just for a second, a flash of pain so deep it was almost physical. Sammy died at Normandy, took a machine gun burst clearing Omaha Beach. I know, sir. His name is on the memorial wall. Reardon paused. How many of you got that tattoo? 43 of us. The first class to graduate from Fort Pierce, the first UDT operators. Frank's voice was distant now, traveling back across decades. By the end of the war, only 11 of us were left. The gym was utterly silent. Every sailor, every sail, every staff member was frozen, listening. Mr. Cordell, one of the other commanders, spoke up. Commander Mitchell of SEAL Team 7. Can you tell us what you did? What missions you were on? Frank shook his head. Most of it's still classified, and the stuff that isn't, well, it doesn't need retelling. We did what we were told to do. Sir, you swam into Tarawa Harbor, Mason said, stepping forward. I looked it up after I saw your tattoo. Frank Cordell. UDT-1. You and 3 other men spent 14 hours in the water, marking underwater obstacles so the Marines could land. You were supposed to be extracted after 6 hours, but your boat was sunk, so you stayed in the water for 14 hours. Under fire, Frank shrugged. Wasn't much choice. The mission wasn't done. You were also at Saipan, Tinian, and Guam, Mason continued. And then they transferred you to the European theater for Normandy. You were in the first wave at Utah Beach. Your team cleared the obstacles while the Germans shot at you from the cliffs. You were 22 years old. We were all young, Frank said. Didn't know any better. Sir Reardon said, do you understand what you represent? You're not just a veteran. You're not just UDT. You're literally one of the men who invented modern naval special warfare. Everything we do, the diving, the demolitions, the reconnaissance, the way we think about maritime operations, it all traces back to you and the men like you. Frank was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, we didn't think about legacy, Captain. We thought about staying alive long enough to help our brothers make it to the beach. Reardon nodded slowly. Then he came to attention, his back ramrod straight. Mr. Cordell, on behalf of Naval Special Warfare Command, I want to thank you for your service. Not just for what you did in the war, but for what you continue to represent, the standard of courage, of sacrifice, of silent professionalism that every SEAL strives for. He rendered a sharp salute. Behind him, every officer in the room did the same. And then, one by one, every sailor and SEAL in the gym came to attention and saluted as well. Frank stood there, an old man in sweaty workout clothes, surrounded by the warriors he'd helped create, and slowly, very slowly, he returned the salute. When he lowered his hand, his eyes were wet. Can I finish my workout now? He asked, his voice rough. Reardon smiled. Of course, sir. But first, would you be willing to answer one question? Depends on the question. The tattoo, the sea turtle, why a turtle? Frank smiled, really smiled for the first time that day, because we were slow. We couldn't outswim anyone, but we always got where we were going, and we carried our protection with us, right on our backs. We were patient, we were steady, and we didn't quit. He pulled up his shirt slightly, showing the faded tattoo more clearly. The knife meant we were ready to fight, but the turtle meant we were ready to endure. And endurance, that's what won the war. Not speed, not strength, just the refusal to give up. One of the youngest SEALs, a petty officer who'd been among those making jokes earlier, stepped forward hesitantly. Sir, can I ask you something? Go ahead. What was the hardest part of what you did? Frank thought about it, coming home, knowing that most of your brothers didn't, carrying that weight for the rest of your life. That's the hardest part. The young SEAL nodded. Slowly, his earlier arrogance completely gone, Reardon turned to address the gym. Everyone here needs to understand something. This man, Mr. Frank Cordell, has lifetime unrestricted access to every NSW facility in the world. Not because of his age, not because of some favor, but because he earned it. He earned it in water so cold it should have killed him. He earned it under fire that should have killed him. He earned it by being brave when the world needed brave men. He looked around at every face. If you ever see him here at Gun or at any facility, you render the respect he deserves. And if I hear that anyone gives him anything less than that, you'll answer to me personally. Is that clear? A chorus of yes, sir, echoed through the gym. Good. Now give Mr. Cordell some space to finish his workout. As the officers began to file out, Frank called out, Captain. Reardon turned. Yes, sir. Those kids at the front desk, they were just doing their jobs. Don't be too hard on them. Reardon smiled. You're a better man than I am, sir. No, Frank said quietly. I just remember being young and stupid once. We all need a little grace. The fitness center had changed. Not in any obvious way. The equipment was the same, the layout unchanged. But something in the atmosphere was different. Frank came 3 times a week now, always at the same time, and every time he walked through the door, something happened that had never happened before. People nodded, not casual nods, but respectful acknowledgments. Young SEALs who'd been mocking him 2 weeks ago now asked if he needed help with equipment. Staff members greeted him by name. And on his second visit, someone had placed a small plaque by the door. It read, in honor of the Underwater Demolition Teams, the original frogmen who made the ultimate sacrifice so others could live, 1943 to 1983, the foundation upon which we stand. Frank had stood looking at that plaque for a full minute, his jaw working silently. Tyler Jenkins, the desk clerk who'd tried to turn him away, had become something of Frank's unofficial assistant. He'd learned everything he could about UDT history, and now when new personnel checked in, he made sure they knew about the old man who sometimes trained there. That's Mr. Cordell, Tyler would say. He's UDT, original UDT, show respect. On Frank's third visit, something remarkable happened. As he was finishing his rowing routine, a young SEAL candidate still in training, barely past Hell Week, approached him hesitantly. Sir, the young man said, my instructor said you might be willing to answer a question. Frank looked up, his weathered face calm. What's your question, son? Sir, I'm struggling. Hell Week broke something in me. I don't know if I can make it through the rest of training. I don't know if I'm strong enough. Frank was quiet for a moment. Then he said, you know what got me through training? What got me through the war? No, sir, I wasn't the strongest, I wasn't the fastest, I wasn't the smartest. Frank tapped his chest. But I refused to quit. That's all. I just refused to quit. Every time I wanted to ring that bell, I told myself, just one more swim, just one more dive, just one more day. And eventually, one more day turned into a lifetime. The young man's eyes were wet. That's it. Just don't quit. That's it. Everything else, the strength, the skill, the knowledge that comes with time, but the refusal to quit, that has to come. From here, Frank tapped his chest again. That's what makes you a frogman. The young man nodded slowly. Thank you, sir. As he walked away, Frank called after him. What's your name, son? Davis, sir. Seaman Davis. You're going to make it. Davis, I can tell. How do you know, sir? Because you're here asking questions instead of sitting in your rack feeling sorry for yourself. That takes courage. And courage is all you need. Frank watched the young man walk away with a little more purpose in his step. He felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Useful not as a monument, not as a relic, but as a bridge between the past and the future. That evening, as Frank was leaving, he ran into Command Master Chief Mason again. Mr. Cordell, Mason said, "Got a minute?" "For you, Master Chief." "Always, sir. We're planning a ceremony, nothing too big. But we want to update the memorial wall at the UDT SEAL Museum. Add the names of some of the early frogmen who never got proper recognition, your classmates, the men from Fort Pierce who didn't make it home." Frank's throat tightened. "All 43. All 43, sir. And we'd like you to be there, to help us dedicate it, to speak their names." Frank was silent for a long moment, then he nodded. "I'd be honored. Thank you, sir." Mason paused. "Can I ask you something personal?" "Go ahead. Why did you come back to the gym? I mean, after everything that happened, after the recognition, most people would have stayed away. Too much attention." Frank smiled slightly. "Because I'm still a frogman, Master Chief, and frogmen don't quit, not because it's hard, not because people are watching. We show up, we do the work, and we go home. That's who we are. That's who you made us, sir." "No," Frank said gently. "You made yourselves. I just showed you it was possible." As Frank walked to his old pickup truck, his gym bag over his shoulder, he looked up at the California sky. Somewhere up there, his brothers were watching. Sammy Rhodes, Tommy Chen, all the others who'd earned that turtle tattoo and never made it home. He climbed into his truck, his joints protesting, and started the engine. Tomorrow he'd be back, and the day after that, and the day after that. Because he was a frogman, and frogmen don't quit. They never had, they never would. Frank Cordell's story reminds us that heroes don't always announce themselves. They don't seek recognition or demand respect. They simply show up, do the work, and carry the weight of history on their backs marked with ink that has faded but never lost its meaning. The sea turtle and the knife tattooed on his back weren't just symbols, they were promises. Promises to brothers who never came home. Promises to stay steady, to endure, to never forget the price that was paid in cold water and under enemy fire. Today, every Navy SEAL who graduates training becomes part of a lineage that stretches back to men like Frank Cordell. Men who swam into the darkness, with nothing but courage and a refusal to quit. Men who invented a brotherhood that would last for generations. And sometimes, that brotherhood walks through the door of a gym in worn sweatpants, carrying a faded gym bag, asking for nothing more than the chance to train alongside the warriors they helped create. If this story moved you, please like this video and share it with someone who needs to be reminded that legends don't always wear medals. Sometimes they just wear patience, humility, and the quiet dignity of a promise kept. Subscribe to Human Truth Tales for more stories of the heroes who built the foundation we all stand on. One mission, one sacrifice, one refusal to quit at a time. In the comments below, tell us, have you ever met someone whose quiet strength changed your perspective? Someone who taught you what true courage looks like? Share their story. Let's honor them together. To the frogmen who came before, to the SEALs who carry the torch today, and to every warrior who refuses to quit, we see you, we honor you, we will never forget.